Another lesson we can learn from Jonah chapter 1 and 2. So, Jonah was given an opportunity from God. God calls him into an assignment and a commission to go speak to the city of Nineveh. And Jonah does not want to do that. So there's a storm, there's a prayer, there's a stinky fishy story, and he gets swallowed by a big fish, and God works on his heart inside the fish. He repents and God spits him out and gives him another chance to be on track. Now, we don't want to go through all of this, right? So we need to make sure that we don't miss the opportunities and the doors that God opens up for us. I just want to talk about why we actually miss those opportunities. The first thing is lack of our spiritual awareness. We ignore God's voice because every opportunity from God starts with his voice, and sometimes we're just too busy and distracted. You have to make sure that you are getting quiet, and in your time with God, that you are making sure you're creating space for God to actually speak to you, and silence your heart and silence your fears and everything that's going on in your head and your heart, so that God can minister to you. The second thing is fear and doubt. Sometimes we fear failure, right? We feel like, Lord, I'm going to fail. I can't take, this is something I've battled with tremendously, is the fear of failure. And one thing I've learned is that even failure, God uses to grow me, and he uses it to mature me. And so I've learned that when I'm following God's voice, regardless of whether I'm not always guaranteed a win, and I'm not always guaranteed that it's going to work out. But to know that I'm in obedience with the Lord, and to feel that his presence on me because I'm pleasing him and doing what he's calling me to do, that holds far more weight than when things don't work out the way you think they should. I heard the Lord asking me this last week, what is a win, Nicolene? And sometimes we miss the things that matter to God. And when he's talking about winning, his measuring stick often looks very different to ours. And so make sure that you're not holding back because of fear of failure. Get some courage. And courage is a person. His name is Jesus. We sometimes doubt God's plan, and that makes us hold back. He says, walk through the store, I'll be with you. And we doubt it, and we hold back in doubt. We can't afford for our doubts to dictate God's faithfulness. Sometimes it's because of misaligned priorities. We're chasing our personal desires, or we're neglecting others. We have no love for people, or we don't worry about our brothers and sisters. We're not our brother's keeper. And that often leads us away from God's opportunities, because God's currency is people. So he's always leading us to change people's lives around us. If it's just about us, we're going to miss what God is trying to do. The other thing is unrealistic expectations. Sometimes I'm expecting big signs, and God is actually in the small, subtle, significant signs. And I miss it because I'm looking for this big thing that I'm chasing. Sometimes sometimes we assume that God's going to work a certain way, and we miss it because we think his method is going to look like this, and in fact it looks completely different. The other thing that makes us miss God is impatience. We need to wait on God and make sure that we don't miss timing. And when we wait on God, we are renewed with his strength. And so we shouldn't be striving and running ahead or lagging back. And sometimes we just miss it because we want to rush ahead, and we want to then birth Ishmaels, which is what happened to Sarah and Abraham with Hagar. And that led to a whole rebellious nation. And so we need to just be patient with the Lord. I've realized that anything rushed isn't really from God, and that often happens. It doesn't mean God doesn't work in the suddenlies, but when I feel like I can't consider people and everything because there's such a rush to do something, I feel like sometimes the enemy pushes us like that. So make sure. I love Psalm 37 verses 3, and it says, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Another version or translation says, befriend his faithfulness. So trust is step number 1. Do good, dwell in the land, and be faithful. So I feel this is 4 steps to make sure you're not missing those God opportunities. It doesn't matter where you are placed, right? Make sure that you are putting those 4 steps in place, that regardless of whether you know what He's doing, do good. Do the good works that God has put around you. Do good to the people around you. But trust Him in that space. Be faithful with that space. And then you will see how God plants you and how He continues to open up those doors. We can't drive a parked car, right? So we learned that with church planting. When we got to this neighborhood, we approached, we have a company right around the corner, a foundation. We went to them and we said, can we help? Devold got involved with some of the patrolling in the area. We greeted our neighbors. We introduced ourselves. We got to know the people around you. Dwell in the land. Be present. Who's your neighbor? Who are the people God's put around you? Who are your colleagues? Those are the opportunities. Those are the open doors. And if you're constantly busy doing what God's called you to do, you're not going to miss those. And we do that all with trust.